I never believed my brother Alex when he first told me about the episode. How could I? A creepy Scooby-Doo episode that only appears when you're using a VPN routed through Eastern Europe? It sounded like one of those urban legends that spread around Reddit. The kind of story that always happened to a friend of a friend. But Alex was convinced. He'd always been the more imaginative one between us, prone to venturing down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and supernatural phenomena. While I became an accountant, he'd spent the years since dropping out of college pursuing his obsession with paranormal investigation, much to our parents' dismay. They'd hoped he would eventually find direction, but instead, he spent his days discussing ghosts, aliens, and urban legends. Throughout his life, Alex had always struggled with severe mental health issues. Since his early teens, he'd been on a cocktail of medications to manage his paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. When he stayed on his meds, he could function somewhat normally, though he still had his odd theories and obsessions. But when he went off of them, which happened more often than any of us like to admit, he'd spiral into dark places. Last month during our weekend gaming session, he showed me screenshots on his phone. They were blurry and dark, but I could make out what looked like Scooby-Doo's mystery machine parked in front of a decrepit house. It was a thumbnail image for an unusually somber-looking Scooby-Doo episode. When he zoomed in on a figure in the background, my blood ran cold. The figure's animation style was weird, too detailed for that version of Scooby-Doo. He was incredibly tall and thin, with hollow orange eyes that seemed to stare directly through the screen. For the next few weeks, Alex became obsessed. He kept trying to recreate the exact conditions that had led him to find the episode. His room became a command center of sorts, with multiple laptops running different VPN configurations. He filled notebooks with every detail he could remember from the episode, his handwriting growing increasingly erratic with each page. One night, he called me with a trembling voice to tell me about documents supposedly hidden in our old family house. He said that the Scooby-Doo villain he had showed me weeks before, who went by Mr.Jenkins, had told him about them, and he also claimed they revealed secrets about our family. He rambled about birth certificates with different names, DNA tests being falsified, and a conspiracy surrounding our family's identity. I tried to reason with him, pointing out obvious holes in his theory, but he was beyond logic. The next day, he broke into our old house. The new owners came home to find him in the basement, tearing apart the walls around the water heater. They called the police, but even after being arrested and released, he remained convinced that he just hadn't looked hard enough. Our parents watched helplessly as their young son spiraled deeper into obsession. Mom's forceful suggestions of therapy were met with angry tirades about how no one understood the importance of what he'd discovered. The last time I saw him, his apartment walls had become covered behind corkboards buried in screenshots, documents, and red string, connecting seemingly random points. The final call from him came early in the morning. He spoke to me in whispers about new instructions from Mr. Jenkins, about a basement area in the abandoned mall near our house that supposedly held the truth about our family. When I begged him to stay where he was, and that I would come to help, he hung up. By the time police reached his apartment, he was already gone. A Scooby-Doo episode was blasting at full volume when I entered, only it was slowed down and repeating part of the episode, a part with a man screaming as he tries to wade above water. But the most disturbing thing was the papier-mâché sculpture of what I can only assume to be Mr. Jenkins, built in the center of the room, his hollow eyes gazing in my direction. I found a paper on his desk with an address and a drawing of a man with spirals for eyes. Below the image was a short message. The answers lie in the darkness below. The address led to the old Westbrook Mall on the edge of town. It had been abandoned since the flood of '97, its lower levels permanently submerged in stagnant water. The main entrances were all boarded up and wrapped in chain-link fencing. But when I arrived with the police, we found the service entrance had been forced open, its rusty padlock lying broken on the ground. The search and rescue team went in first. I waited outside, watching as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. The massive structure loomed above us like a concrete tomb. About an hour passed, then one of the rescuers emerged, his face grim. They found Alex's body in the flooded basement level, in what used to be the central maintenance area. They believed he had gotten disoriented in the pitch-black maze of service corridors and must have slipped down a stairwell, landing in the water, which was deeper than it looked. The weird thing was that there were 2 other bodies in there as well. 2 teens who seemed to have been deceased for months floating in the water. And the scariest thing was that one of them had a Scooby-Doo t-shirt on. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to tell our parents the full story. As far as they know, Alex had been struggling with mental health issues and had an accident while exploring urban ruins. They didn't need to know about the episode about Mr. Jenkins or the wild conspiracy theory that had driven their son to his death, but I couldn't let it go. After the funeral, I spent weeks researching everything I could find about this mysterious episode. I found only one other account, posted on an obscure forum dedicated to lost media. The poster described an almost identical experience, logging into a Latvian server, the grayscale opening sequence in the episode, and the scary, realistic Mr. Jenkins with his void black suit. Only in their version, Mr. Jenkins had led them to investigate an underwater river cave that their father used to go to. The post ended with a warning that chilled me to my bone. If you ever come across Mr. Jenkins' final game, do not watch it. I made the choice to walk away, but I know others haven't been so lucky. Whatever Mr. Jenkins is, he's not trying to help anyone. He's leading people to their deaths, one mystery at a time. I tried to contact the user by email, but no one ever responded. Hopefully they someday will. What really disturbs me now is what's been happening with my computer. Since Alex's death, I've started noticing that my VPN will not connect to anything but Eastern Europe. And even when I eventually connect somewhere else, I always notice it's connected to Eastern Europe again whenever I check, as if something has been forcing my connection to those same servers Alex used. I find myself tempted to try watching it these days, to just go ahead and search for that episode when the VPN is logged in. Part of me wants to see this Mr. Jenkins for myself, to understand what convinced my brother so completely. But then I remember his broken body being dragged out of the mall, and I close my laptop. Because I know Mr. Jenkins is still out there, playing his game. And as my brother learned too late, the only way to win is not to play at all.